On the morning of August 15, 1975, 8-year-old Gretchen Harrington departed from her home in Broomall, Pennsylvania, to attend summer Bible school. The Trinity Chapel Christian Reformed Church, which she was scheduled to visit, was located less than half a mile from her residence. However, during her journey, an unfortunate event occurred, and Gretchen never arrived at Bible school. Her father, who served as the pastor of a secondary church location, was acquainted with David Zanstra, the pastor of the church Gretchen was supposed to attend that day. After several hours had passed without any word from his daughter, he alerted Zanstra about her disappearance, prompting him to contact the authorities. An extensive search for the young girl was initiated, but no trace of her was found. Nearly 2 months later, on October 14, skeletal remains were uncovered in Ridley Creek State Park, not far from where Gretchen had vanished. The remains were subsequently identified as belonging to the missing 8-year-old, with the cause of death determined to be skull injuries. The case was classified as a homicide, leading to an investigation that eventually went cold. In 2023, almost 48 years after Gretchen's tragic murder, a significant development occurred. On July 24, the Delaware County District Attorney's Office announced the arrest of 83-year-old David Zanstra, who was charged with first, second, and third-degree criminal homicide, as well as kidnapping of a minor and possession of an instrument of crime. A significant development in the case occurred just 1 week prior, when investigators opted to re-interview Zanstra, the pastor of the church that Gretchen attended on the day of her disappearance. Disturbingly, Zanstra was not only a trusted family friend but also the father of one of Gretchen's closest friends. During their 2023 interview, police noted that he initially denied any involvement. However, when confronted with evidence of past sexual misconduct, he broke down and revealed to detectives that he had seen the young girl walking alone on the road on the morning she went missing. Zanstra claimed that he offered Gretchen a ride to the church, which she accepted due to her familiarity and trust in him. Instead, he drove her to a nearby wooded area, where he parked the car and requested that she remove her clothing. The 8-year-old refused, which incited his anger. He then struck her with his fist, leaving her bleeding. Believing she was dead, he concealed her body and fled the scene. Jack Stahl-Steyer condemned Zanstra as a monster, stating that he was a remorseless child predator who masqueraded as a friend, neighbor, and man of God, ultimately taking the life of an innocent child. He further remarked that Zanstra had maintained the facade of a family friend for years following Gretchen's death. Investigators chose to revisit Zanstra after a woman came forward in the autumn of 2022, expressing a desire to discuss Gretchen's case. Upon connecting with an officer, she indicated that she believed she knew the identity of the killer and possessed diaries from the 1970s containing relevant information. At the time of the murder, the individual was merely 10 years old and resided in Halfton, approximately 3 miles east of the location where Gretchen disappeared. This woman had previously been friends with one of Zanstra's daughters during her childhood, recalling frequent sleepovers at their residence. She reported to the authorities that on one occasion, she awoke in the middle of the night to find Zanstra inappropriately touching her. Upon her movement, he quickly left the room but returned the following night to repeat the act. When she inquired with her friend, Zanstra's daughter, about his behavior, the response was that he does that sometimes. After returning home, she informed her parents about the incident, leading them to prohibit her from spending the night at the pastor's house. In her diaries, she also documented an attempted abduction involving a friend named Holly, stating, "Guess what? A man tried to kidnap Holly twice. It's a secret, so I can't tell anyone, but I think he might be the one who kidnapped Gretchen. I think it was Mr. Z." Witnesses on the day of Gretchen's disappearance reported seeing her conversing with a man inside a vehicle, with some accounts suggesting that the car resembled Zanstra's. However, investigators at that time were unable to establish a definitive link between the pastor and the crime. DNA samples were collected from Zanstra during his arrest in 2023, which will be analyzed to determine if they correspond with any unresolved cases. Authorities have voiced concerns that, given his position as a pastor, Zanstra may have victimized numerous other children. Laura Kempton, a 23-year-old woman, was discovered deceased on September 28, 1981, having last been seen entering her ground-floor apartment on Chapel Street in the early hours of that morning. In Portsmouth, New Hampshire, the body of Laura was discovered by a police officer who had arrived to deliver a court summons regarding unpaid parking tickets. The officer noticed signs of a break-in at the front door and, upon peering through the partially open door, observed a body inside. The crime was particularly brutal. Laura had been concealed beneath a mattress and bedding, with her ankles bound by an electrical cord. It was determined that she had been sexually assaulted prior to her death. Authorities indicated that a wine bottle was likely used as a weapon during the attack. Laura was a student at the Portsmouth Beauty School, pursuing a career as a hairdresser, and was employed at both the Marco Polo gift store and Karen's ice cream parlor. Known for her hard-working nature and vibrant personality, she was regarded as a free spirit. Investigators found that she probably died shortly after returning home, having sustained blunt force trauma to the head. For weeks, detectives sought leads to unravel the circumstances of her murder, but as time passed, the investigation stalled, and the case went cold. In 2023, however, a significant development occurred. Laura's killer was identified as Ronnie James Lee, a 21-year-old man who was living and working in Portsmouth at the time of the crime. Assistant Attorney General Rachel Harrington stated that there was no evidence to suggest any prior acquaintance between Laura and Lee. Born in 1960, Lee had a brief military service until 1981, after which he was employed by MBI Security at Liberty Mutual in Portsmouth. In November 1982, he was arrested for theft and was residing with his mother at that time. Lee's involvement in Laura's murder was not his sole criminal activity. He had a history of offenses, including 5 burglaries, 2 of which he admitted guilt to, as well as a sexual assault conviction in 1987. This latter conviction was linked to another burglary, resulting in a 3-year prison sentence. Although Lee cannot be prosecuted for the murder now, investigators have classified the case as solved. He passed away in 2005 at the age of 45 due to acute cocaine intoxication. Had he survived, he would be facing first-degree murder charges. Ruth Marie Terry, previously referred to as the Lady of the Dunes, was discovered on July 26, 1974, in a state of decomposition in Race Point Dunes, Provincetown, Massachusetts. Her body was located among shrubbery, just a short distance from a road, and it was believed she had died approximately 2 weeks earlier. She was found lying face down on a beach blanket. Investigators speculated that she may have known her assailant or had been killed while asleep, as there were no defensive wounds or clear indications of a struggle. Described as approximately 5'6" tall and weighing 145 pounds, she had red hair styled in a ponytail, pink painted toenails, and was discovered with a blue bandana and a pair of Wrangler jeans placed under her head. Despite having undergone significant dental work, she was missing several teeth, as well as her hands and one forearm, likely to hinder identification through fingerprints and dental records. Her age was estimated to be between 20 and 49 years. The cause of death was determined to be a head injury, with one side of her skull severely crushed, possibly by a military-style entrenching tool. Additionally, her body showed signs of sexual assault, likely occurring post-mortem. The investigation soon reached an impasse, and without a name for Jane Doe, she was buried in October 1974 and referred to as the Lady of the Dunes. The case remained inactive for several decades until 2015, when theories arose suggesting that the Lady of the Dunes may have been an extra in the film Jaws. In Provincetown, an extra appeared in the film's 4th of July beach scene, featuring a woman adorned with a blue bandana and jeans akin to those found with the body. However, this lead did not yield any further developments. As years passed without progress, it was not until 2022 that Orth from Inc. Corporation specializing in forensic genetic genealogy commenced testing on the skeletal remains discovered in June. On October 31, the FBI announced the long-awaited identification of Jane Doe, Ruth Marie Terry, born on September 8, 1936, in Whitwell, Tennessee. Little is known about her early life, but in 1957, at the age of 21 and following a brief marriage, she relocated to Leonia, Michigan, where she began her employment at the Fisher Body automotive plant. Her sister-in-law, Jan Terry, remembered her as a person who cherished her family, and her brother Ken described her as a free spirit, seeking more than a conventional rural existence. In 1958, Ruth gave birth to her son Richard but was unable to provide for him. Consequently, she consented to have the superintendent of her workplace adopt him, with the understanding that he would cover her expenses. This superintendent and his wife were close friends of Ruth's. After this arrangement was finalized, she moved to California. Although she attempted to reconnect with her son in 1972, he was a teenager at that time and not prepared to establish a relationship with her. In the following years, Ruth met Guy Rockwell Mullen, and they married on February 16, 1974. Mullen, an antique dealer in Reno, Nevada, was not well received by her family when they finally met, just 4 months prior to her death. Ruth visited her family in Provincetown, where her grandniece noted that the 38-year-old seemed different in the presence of her husband. Family members also observed Mullen's possessive behavior. Subsequently, the couple traveled to Chattanooga, Tennessee, to see her brother Ken, who recalled discussions between Mullen and Ruth about traveling across the country to collect antiques, including a potential visit to Massachusetts. In late summer 1974, Mullen returned to Tennessee and informed Ruth's family that she had gone missing from their shared home in California. Ruth's sister-in-law, Jan, remarked on his bluntness, stating he claimed not to know her whereabouts and did not linger for long. Ruth's brother, James, traveled to California and hired a private investigator to locate his sister. The investigator discovered that all of Ruth's belongings had been sold and suggested that she may have left the state voluntarily after becoming involved with a religious cult. One family member speculated that Ruth might have entered a witness protection program, rendering her unable to contact her loved ones. Richard Hanchett, Ruth's son, told the Californian that they could not find any information and confronted Mullen, who simply stated that she had left, describing her as free-spirited. Meanwhile, Ruth's sister-in-law expressed her long-standing unease about the man Ruth married. For decades, the family was left without answers, but when the announcement of her identification came in 2022, they felt a sense of relief, finally able to find closure. A month after the identification, they began to process their emotions. Investigators initiated an inquiry into Mullen, suspecting him to be the last individual to have seen her alive. They first observed that in 1974, Mullen was operating Ruth's vehicle and had informed several acquaintances of her death. Subsequently, they uncovered his extensive criminal history. Mullen was born on October 27, 1923, and in 1958, he wed his second wife, Manzanita Ryan, who vanished alongside her 18-year-old daughter, Dolores, from a previous marriage in April 1960. Mullen emerged as the primary suspect in this case and fled Seattle shortly after their disappearance, although he was later captured by the FBI. True crime author Ann Rule claimed in her 2007 publication, Smoke, Mirrors, and Murder, that law enforcement discovered body parts in Mullen's septic tank, yet they could not establish a connection to the missing women. Prosecutors hesitated to file charges in the absence of a body, resulting in no charges being brought against him regarding the disappearances. Mullen entered into a third marriage on July 29, 1960, shortly before facing felony charges for embezzling $10,000 from his second wife's family around the time of her and her daughter's disappearance. In 1961, he was convicted and sentenced to 15 years in prison. However, a judge suspended this sentence in March 1962, contingent upon Mullen's repayment of the stolen funds. In 2023, investigators revealed that Mullen had been identified as Ruth's murderer. Although he cannot be prosecuted due to his death in 2002 at the age of 78, authorities now regard Ruth's case as resolved.